Hi everyone. I wanted to record a short video on thesis statements, but before I get to that, I wanted to say thank you for your thoughts and your expressions of trepidation about writing this project to illustration essay. It is a difficult topic, and it's one that we often, I think, avoid, and we are afraid of hurting other people's feelings, which is valid and honorable. But I think that some of these conversations can help us to better understand each other, each other's experiences. And I just want to thank you for being vulnerable and for being able to write about these things. So, one of the things that in your Project One reflection that I asked if you wanted a little bit more help with was thesis statements. So, I wanted to go over what thesis statements are and aren't and give you some examples. So, what a thesis statement isn't is it is not your topic. You start with a topic, and for this one, it is about identity, specifically racial identity, and you try to answer a question about it usually. And that helps you to form your sentence. But your topic is not equivalent to your thesis statement. It's not a fact, since facts cannot be argued, they have been proven to be true. You can use facts to support your thesis, obviously, but you can't argue a fact. And remember, one of the tenets of being a thesis statement and being a strong thesis statement is that you can debate it or argue about it. It is not a fragment. That just means it's not an incomplete sentence. The decreases in marijuana usage in the US might be a title, but it's not a complete sentence. And then it's not a question. We can start by asking ourselves questions and try to answer them through our thesis statement. And we can use questions as a device to open our essay, as an attention grabber. But remember, it has to be a statement. It has to be an assertion. So it is usually a single declarative sentence that expresses the principal idea or argument of your essay. It could be two sentences, but usually it's one, and it's usually at the very end of your introduction. It's a good place to put it, especially as we are honing our writing skills, because it's predictable, and readers like predictability, especially when it comes to more academic essays. And it helps your reader know, okay, this is what the topic is, this is what your stance as a writer is, and here's what I can expect you to talk about. So oftentimes it will include a preview. So think of an introductory paragraph like an upside down triangle, if you will. You start with your attention getter, which could be a story, a startling fact, a series of questions, an anecdote, statistics, and then you give us a little bit of background if we need it, and then you end the introductory paragraph with your thesis statement, which again is your topic plus your stance on it. So as you begin to generate your thesis, and I think I touched on this a little bit when I discussed pre-writing, that sometimes you don't know what your argument is until you begin to write. And so if you need to draft or pre-write a little bit before that, that's okay. And start asking yourself the who, what, when, where, why questions. And so if you know that you wanted to talk about, for instance, having computers in the classroom, you would want to say, okay, what are the benefits? And then conversely, what are the disadvantages of them? And then you could say the potential benefits of computers in classrooms are X, Y, Z as you do your research and start to dig more into your topic. So great work of art may come from an artist's most difficult period. And so this is an assignment prompt that I've had for previous illustration essays. And this is one that students tend to like. So they can go from any artist, an artist being a painter, a singer, a writer, a dancer, and then talk about their lives and things that happened in their lives. So you'd have to figure out what genre of art you'd want to focus on, what artists you'd want to focus on. And so since I teach literature and we deal with Sylvia Plath, I would maybe do Sylvia Plath's battle with lifelong mental illness and a bad marriage helped to create some of the most jarring and evocative poetry of the 20th century. Students in my Intro to Lit class are currently reading two of her poems that are pretty stark and depressing. And Plath certainly suffered from mental health issues all of her life, and unfortunately died by suicide in her 30s. And so she's one of those artists that stick with you, and her work sticks with you. And we analyze in that class what some of the influences might have been to cause that artwork. Another prompt that I had given students was that TV has produced a number of classic programs, and then they were asked to think about what does it mean to have a television show that's a classic, and then to give examples of it and show how they are classics. And then I want you to be aware of avoiding some of these common mistakes in announcing your thesis. These types of announcements are better served for speeches. So this essay will discuss, or I'm going to write about, or in this essay I will show. So get rid of those, use those for speeches instead of academic essays, and try to just do topic plus stance. So in the two examples here, instead of the announcement with number one, you see that number two is a little bit more concise and straightforward. Long-term drug use can have disastrous effects on one's marriage, career, and health. So you have what the top essay is about, long-term drug use. You have a stance, disastrous effects, and you have a preview, marriage, career, and health. So that's kind of a good basic structure for building a thesis statement. Again, number two is an announcement. So number one will be better. Teachers can fight teenage drug abuse by educating young people on its dangers and being good role models. Again, you have a weaker one and then a stronger one. This is going into the fashion industry a little bit. And violent revolutions have had both positive and negative results. You want to avoid overly vague, generic, big topics like this for thesis statements, because everything can have positive and negative effects. So you want to be more specific. You want to drill down. And so although violent revolutions begin to redress longstanding social inequities, they often do so at the cost of long-term economic dysfunction and the suffering that attends it. So instead of doing a big, broad topic like positives and negatives, this person decides to drill it down to, okay, economic dysfunction and what happens when people become poor or impoverished. A couple more examples. Hunger persists in Appalachia because jobs are scarce in farming and the infertile soil is really profitable. That would be a decent one. The thesis of this paper is, we know we don't want to do announcements, so that one's not going to work. And then the North and the South fought the Civil War for many reasons, some of which were the same and some different. Again, too blah, too bland, too generic, no argument there really. For this one, number one, too vague, too broad. Letter A, I should say. Letter C is a fact that we could use to help support it, but B would be the best and strongest thesis statement. So as you begin to write your thesis, you can begin to kind of plug and play with this type of a method. Again, this is a starting point. This is not what your thesis will read like, but if you struggle with writing thesis statements, this might be a good exercise for you to do as you build your thesis. So what do you plan to do? Those are some verbs that you can use to help you determine what your argument is, and then think about the reasons for it. So legalizing prostitution in the U.S. will create a fairer and safer working environment for women. It will provide union and health benefits and will reduce the crime and abuse often associated with the illegal sex industry. So these are two sentences, but it's the thesis statement, and it's very arguable. There'd be plenty of people who would argue at this point, but you give two primary things that you're going to focus on. So health and union benefits, and then crime and abuse associated. So it's a pretty strong, arguable thesis. So as you begin to refine your thesis statement, as you're ready to submit for Sunday, think about what your topic is and what you're trying to argue about for it. And the illustrations or examples that you provide to help prove your thesis will be your main points, essentially. And those will be what you probably want to preview in your thesis statement. So quick overview of thesis statements. And again, I appreciate all of your willingness to work on this project and delve into something that is hard, but that's how we learn. I appreciate it. Thank you.